Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Good morning. It is for me anyway. Welcome. Thank you for your practice, your continued study, and your support of this channel. We are practicing Shakyamuni's teachings, most specifically his ultimate teaching of the Lotus Sutra. That is the Buddhism that we practice, albeit with the instruction and elucidation of many great scholars, bodhisattvas, teachers, and most notably for our era and our time, our mentor, Nichiren. Yes? So, in that, we have been reading an introduction by Daisetsu Taitaro Suzuki on his translation of the Lankavatara. And the reason we're reading his introduction, which is a lengthy one, but we're getting to the end of it here so we can start diving into the Lankavatara Sutra proper, is because he stated at the outset that he was going to review his scholarship, his understanding of the Mahayana school, and that would be helpful for us, not only as a review from our perspective as Lotus Sutra Buddhism practitioners, from the ultimate teachings of Shakyamuni, and our understanding of the full breadth of Mahayana and Hinayana, but more to the point, where does Suzuki stand on all of this as he then dives into this Lankavatara, which he fully admits and demonstrates its application in the alternative school, I'll call it, called Chan, or Zen, which, Nichiren talked enough about that, and I've mentioned it before. I'm not going to dive into that. But we are students of Shakyamuni Buddha, yeah? Shakyamuni and Buddha-ness, yes? So it's kind of interesting. I think it's not just kind of interesting, but in a way essential for us to know where Suzuki's coming from as we then dive into the sutra. And no doubt I will be pointing it out as we go through the Lankavatara from our perspective of the Lotus Sutra, yes? So now he's going to talk about the twofold truth. This is the constant reminder of duality versus enlightenment. So let's just get into it. The distinction between the highest truth, the Paramartha Satya, and conventional truth, Samvriti Satya, is not explicitly held in the Lanka. Of course not. Obviously, it doesn't contain the ninth consciousness in the conceptual framework of understanding how the mind works. But allusions are occasionally made to them, albeit within the Alaya. We've discussed this, or I have anyway, several times now. So rather than get bogged down into that, let's just continue. And it is said that false discrimination belongs to conventionalism. So what could conventionalism be? I guess the way we're used to doing things, right? Another word for conventionalism is Vyavarahara, vyavahara, or worldly experience, according to which we talk of things being born and destroyed, and also of how, what, where, etc. of existence. The 5 W's, I've talked about this before. This is all a preoccupation of categorizing, data collection, identification, right? This kind of knowledge does not help us to have any insight into the depths of being. Or I would restate that as it gives us insight into being in samsara, in an attached universe of thinking, of mind, right? But transcending it isn't included in that rhetoric. It's just not. It's not. It's an actually a divergent reality. But that's our problematic, right? That's where Buddhism steps in and says, you don't have to be suffering from all of those attachments. You can shift your perception of all the same stuff, but from a perspective of non-ownership and constant coursing in with, amongst all these energies. Releases you from being possessed by all the things, yeah? So now he goes into the 3 svabhavas. This would probably make more sense with the I wonder, I should put that up. I'll try to put that drawing up here of the Nidana, right? That schematic that I made some time ago. And you've seen it before, but I'll put it up here. Another way of classifying knowledge is known as the 3 svabhavas in the Lanka. So right away he gives away that the Lankavatara uses a lot of early texts and foundational, if you will, early works of Shakyamuni's teachings in order to explore the Mahayana aspect of those teachings. This is a generally recognized classification in all the schools of Mahayana Buddhism. Svabhava means self-nature, or self-reality, or self-substance, which we've already discussed is the primary illusion of samsara, that things have their own nature, that there's a molecule of Sylvain. There just isn't. That's just the illusion of possessing a self is making permanent, right? Making a thing as a self-existing thing, which is an illusion of time-space that we use in our minds to navigate the physical realms, yes? It's not that it doesn't exist, it's that our attachment to that thinking causes us all our problems. The existence of which in some form is popularly accepted. Of course it is. The first form of knowledge by which the reality of things is assumed is called parikalpita, or imagined. That is, imagination in its ordinary sense, right? An imagined thing is a constructed thing, right? But now we're going to break that down into what we imagine or how we imagine it. I hope. This is an illusion, for things are imagined to exist really where in fact there are none. It is like seeing a mirage which vanishes as one approaches. Imagined, parikalpita objects have therefore no objective reality. Like the boogeyman under your bed. As soon as you investigate, there's no boogeyman. But the boogeyman seems very, very real, quote unquote, to you if your imagination has a strong hold on you. Right? What's that hold? Possession. Right? How does it evaporate? How does it go away? By simply looking. Okay? The second form of knowledge by which we examine existence, depending upon one another, or paratantra, This is a kind of scientific knowledge based on analysis. Buddhists make use of this knowledge to disprove the substantiality of individual objects, that is, the sravavata of things. According to them, there is nothing self-existing in the world. Everything is depending for its existence on something else. Everything is depending for its existing on something else. Things are universally mutually conditioned, endlessly related to one another. Dissect an object considered final, and it dissolves itself into airy nothingness. Modern scientists declare that existence is no more than mathematical formulae. The Mahayanas would say that there is no svabhava in anything appealing as such to the Vijnanas when it is examined from the Paratantra point of view. So let's take that to our modern conclusion. And what that is, okay, you believe that this bookmark is real. But in the Svabhavas, this is a type of imagining. Because if you took a microscope, or you put this in water long enough, and looked at what this paper is made of, but let's just talk about this bookmark, and you went into it deeply enough, you would see that the ink is not the paper, the gloss is not the ink, the paper is actually molecules of cellulose arranged in a particular order. And then it really gets weird, because this is solid, right? Right? But as you go into those molecules of cellulose, you find that its atomic structure is mostly nothing. That there's very, 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 very little solidity to what appears at this distance solid. And if you break down the molecular structure with the atoms as far away as, you know, there's all these comparative scales, like the distance between New York and Los Angeles in North America, or from Canada to Mexico, is the distance of the atoms that make up a molecule. You start to get these scales of imaginings in your mind where, oh my goodness, this is mostly nothing. And then you get to the atoms, which again are hardly anything at all. And then you look at that hardly anything at all even further, and the points that you're identifying as being so far apart in an atom are themselves just states of energy. And now your mind is truly blown. Because when you back out of that, kind of like Horton Hears a Who, if you've ever watched that, I recommend it just for the part where he looks upon a, what do you call them, dandelion? Yeah, that'll blow your mind as a Buddhist. This is so much nothing that it confounds the samsaric imagination. This is just energy. Within energy. It's just tendencies and conditions. Yeah. It's hard to wrap your head around, and that's why I repeat it in so many ways that I can, because at some point you're going to go, aha, I get it. Right? But this is, imagine a man 3,000 years ago seeing into the true nature of things this deeply. Wow. Respect, yeah? The imagined view of reality does not give us a true knowledge of it. And the relativity view reduces it into nothingness. Well, no thingness, but not nothingness. See, language is problematic at this level, yeah? If so, where does our boat of enlightenment get anchored? Where's Buddhahood? Well, you don't have the ninth consciousness in your dialogue yet, so of course you're lost. But be that as it may, oh, come on. How did I lose that? Okay. The Lanka tells us that there is a third way of viewing existence. Aha. Called the Parinishpana, or the perfected imagination. Imagine that. Which allows us to become truly acquainted with reality as it is. And we hear this a lot from certain sectarian camps. But this isn't the level of the Lotus Sutra, so let's keep that in mind, yeah? It is this perfected knowledge whereby we are enabled to really to see into the nature of existence, to perceive rightly what is meant by svabhava, and to declare that there is no svabhava as is imagined by the ignorant, and that all is sunya, or empty. But again, you have to qualify empty as being full, to stay within the rhetoric here, of potential or quiescent energy. It only appears empty to the samsaric or ignorant mind, the mind that does not know that all of time-space is constantly on the edge of roiling into formations. And if I give you a samsaric example, poor as it is, maybe you can more directly understand that statement that I just made on emptiness not being empty. It would be not unlike waking up from a deep sleep and assuming that in that deep sleep you did not exist. That's just silly, isn't it? Perfect or perfected knowledge issues from prajna or aryajnana, or sometimes simply jnana, seeing into the suchness of things. And here we are trapped in that eighth consciousness again, but I want to resist repeating myself because it can be confusing enough trying to get through the word salad that we're presented without adding more layers of salad. I apologize for that, but sometimes the only way to understand something is to linguistically surround it several times until we can hone in on something. But basically what this is saying is that perfect or perfected knowledge, it's a whole school of thought that starts way back with Nagarjuna, or before Nagarjuna, yeah? It's the perfection of wisdom dialogue here that's being grasped at in the Lanka. It perceives things as they are because going beyond the realm of being and non-being, which belongs to discrimination, the principle of dichotomization, it dives into the abyss where there are no shadows. This is called self-realization. So states the Lanka that as the wise see reality with their eye of prajna, they ascertain definitely what it is, i.e., it is self-nature, and not as it is seen by ignorant, whose eye is never raised beyond the horizon of relativity. And this identifies the greatest error. It wasn't an error then because people were still reaching for what would later be the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. But to practice this fundamental thought today is a heinous error. It's because there's no ninth consciousness considered here at all. All of this happens within the realm of samsara from its brilliant analysis of samsara. But you're still in samsara. You haven't transcended the samsaric world to something far more universal, that is Buddha suchness, which is a suchness with no suchness, right? Because again, he's still saying that this realization of, and I don't agree, because if you study the perfection of wisdom, yes, it's all taking place in our perceptive realities, in the way the mind works. But, and maybe it's because I studied it with knowing the Lotus Sutra, but to me, when I slogged through all of the sutras, the writings on the Prajna-paramitas and the perfection of wisdom sutras, it became obvious to me that the mind could transcend the experience of physicalness, the experience of the physical world, the samsaric worlds of attachment, the universe of attachment, yeah? But here he states that ultimately we get to a true self-nature, and that could only be said from this perspective that we are our karmic train, and from that karmic train is the only place we can view the physical world. Well, the karmic train is the physical world, so it too must be transcended. But I guess we're not there yet. Let's see what he says next. Maybe he'll correct himself. It wouldn't be the first time, yeah? This is again called seeing into the emptiness of things. Emptiness, sunyata, however, does not mean relativity, as it is thought by some scholars. Good statement. Relativity emptiness is on the lower plane of knowledge and does not reveal the real view of existence as it is. So in his words, he's trying to define that if you see emptiness from the vantage point of being, then you don't understand emptiness. Emptiness taught in the Mahayana text goes far deeper into the matter. Good. It is the object of transcendental knowledge. As long as one stays in the world of relativity where logic rules supreme, one cannot have even the remotest idea of true emptiness, or what is designated in the Prajna-paramita as Mahasunyata. The Lanka has also this kind of sunyata mentioned as one of the 7 emptinesses, page 94. We'll get to that. Relativity emptiness, so-called, corresponds to the first of the 7 emptinesses, while the Mahayana sunyata is Paramatra Aryajnana Mahasunyata, that is, the great void of noble wisdom, which is the highest reality. I'll leave that for the Lankavatara, but that's a mouthful, isn't it? Still, though, noble wisdom implies the perceiver. Not that that's not Mahayana, not that that's not a vantage point we explore in the Lotus Sutra. Self-enlightenment, yes? But to transcend the mechanism of mind to perceive into a place where everything is simply experience, and now you let go of mind, perceiver, perceived, and you're just in it, that's a level beyond. That's a level we already are traveling in, our illusion of time-space. we're not quite there yet in this teaching. But we're certainly prepared for it, aren't we? The 5 dharmas. Before concluding this section, we must not forget to mention what is known as the 5 dharmas in the Lanka, making up one of the main topics of discourses. The 5 dharmas and the 3 shvabhavas are different ways of classifying the same material. The 5 are appearances, names, discrimination, right knowledge, and suchness, or tathata. The first 3 correspond to the 2 of the 3 shvabhavas, while the last 2 belong to the Prajna-paramitas, the transcendent knowledge. But see, we're going to go from knowledge, which is a quantifiable, qualifiable thing, to experience, which is just it, just the experience of. You can't really define the experience. You can only have the experience. Because moment to moment, it's moving. It has its own momentum. And yet it doesn't change position. Right? It's a location of mind, a point of mind that exists throughout all time space. It's not limited or defined as a point in time, space. It's outside time space. It's hard, isn't it? Our relative knowledge starts with the perceiving appearances to which names are given, namarupa, right? Names are then thought real, and discrimination is carried on. So by naming, identifying something, we then move on to identify something else, or something that is not that thing identified, and so on and so forth, right? We can say that the discrimination has been with us from the first, even when what is called perception has not even taken place. Perception in this regard being seen as the identification from your personal vantage point, as opposed to the mechanism of perception, which is what he's trying to define as separate. Discrimination again, yeah? For naming is impossible without some form of discrimination. You can't name one thing without identifying what you're not naming, right? You can't have something without having something else that isn't that thing, right? It's like the glass half full or half empty. Look, it's a glass. It's always full. It's just a matter of what it's full of. Is it 50% water and 50% air? Is the glass a container at all? Because it too is contained. I mean, you can go Nagarjuna style. You could go forever with this argument, yeah? Then the worst thing comes upon us as we begin to persuade ourselves and think that by giving names, existence has been successfully disposed of, and feel comfortable about the problems of religion. Wow, he just walked into another room. I wasn't prepared for that. Okay. Although without naming, no knowledge is possible, right knowledge is not to be had here. For this is the inexpressible and unnameable. It is the meaning artha, not to be grasped by words. In this, the Lanka permits no equivocation. It most emphatically advises us not to attach ourselves to words. Yeah, well, as you'll see, that's Shakyamuni admonishing his interlocutor, this Bodhisattva Mahasattva, to stop coming at him with the same question 100 different ways. Stop manipulating the words and just consider what we're meaning with these words. But I'm not sure. I mean, that's true. The Lankavatara does do that. But, he meandered around coming to that point. And I have to admit, how he got to religion out of this, I'm not sure. Let's continue. The object of right knowledge is suchness of things as not conditioned by the category of being and not being. The object of right knowledge is suchness of things as not conditioned by the category of being and not being. It is in this sense that ultimate reality is said to be like the moon in the water. It is not immersed in it, nor is it outside it. Well, yes, it is. If you're talking about the reflection specifically, okay. We cannot say that the moon is in the water, of course, for it is a mere reflection, but we cannot say that it is not there, for a reflection, though it may be, it is really before us. Lots of questions there, yeah? Plurality of objects is not real from the point of view of relativity as well as from the point of view of suchness. Not sure I agree with that. See, again, this is a poor analogy because he's using the moon to say that the reflection in the water, and this is a very, I don't want to refer to that again. This is a very problematic of the cleverness of words, saying that you see the moon in the water, but the moon's not in the water. And yet you have the reflection. Well, yeah, you're seeing a reflection. You're seeing the surface of the water mirroring an object. That does not definitively prove that there can be no more than the one object, though, does it? But that's what he's alluding to here. There can't be two moons. There's a reflection, and then there's the moon. Okay, I buy that on the Samsaric level, but then he says, you can't have plurality, more than one moon, because of the point of view of suchness. Well, that's where I take issue. Because suchness of the moon isn't the moon. Suchness of the moon is the potential for moonness. And as you and I know, there are moons everywhere. There are many, 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 many pluralities of moon, because ultimately moon is a definition, not a thing. We just smacked a satellite into a moon of an asteroid. So yeah, suchness obviates plurality. Think about that. If someone declares such reality as maintained by the Mahayana is too ethereal, too phantom-like, too unreal for our, again with religion, religious aspirations. Well, if you're looking for answers in Buddhism for religious aspirations, look no further. Get out of here. Because you're not going to get this cosmic handout from any mind consciousness elsewhere. That's just not Buddhism. It cannot be Buddhism, because that's not how Buddhism understands the world. So why this guy keeps hitting on religion? That's like saying, well, we want to practice Buddhism, but we don't have all the right rituals yet. Do you remember Nichiren talking about the Shingon sect? And how livid he was at the proponents of the Shingon, what was that first guy's name? What was his name? Anyway, he got a subjugated monk beneath him, in other words, in his hierarchy, to write a whole revision to the Lotus Sutra, to include within it, separate from it, but his own sutra. It wasn't the Lotus, it wasn't the Amitabha too. It was something about life. Anyway, the point is, he had included hand, finger signs and magical incantations, because he recognized that people love that shit. You give them enough things to go, blah, 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 and in the hand position, oh, you got to do it on this beat, not that beat. They get so preoccupied with their samsaric attachments to hand signs and blah, blah, blah. Now we've got them. They'll all follow me now. Because, as is pointed out from time to time from some of you, this is getting too complicated for me. This is a little too profound. I'm not there yet. I need to study just the basic stuff. Good on you. Great on you for recognizing that this is challenging stuff. You'll get there. We'll all get there. We all have the promise of realization of Buddhahood. But if you're looking for your realization of Buddhahood through hand signals and magic words, walk on by. Yeah? And that's what he's identifying here. If someone declares such reality as maintained by the Mahayana is too ethereal, too phantom-like, too unreal for our religious aspirations, the Lanka will immediately retort, you are still on the plane of relativity. You're still playing in samsara. You have no aspiration of enlightenment. You're fooling yourself. Go ahead and play your hand signals. When the Arajnana is awakened, Tathagata is the most real thing and a term most fittingly applied as far as our power of designation is concerned. So, yeah, I agree. Once you identify the true nature of phenomena, everything else follows from that. There's no need for further discernment. Oh, right? But it's not easy. It's not easy to say, we have found the electron field. The fields of potential are what all of the instantiations of that potential that exist, every single electron throughout the entire universe, numbers too big for us to even fathom, are all instantiations of the electron field. Like the Higgs boson, like so many things that physicists are starting to notice but can't wrap their heads around. Sorry, write a book. The message of the Lanka. There are many other thoughts of interest in the Lanka which may be discussed in this introduction, but as I've already given up many pages to it, and as the reader who wishes to know more about the sutra may go to my studies in the Lankavatara, self-promotion, I will say just a few words about the position of this sutra among the general Mahayana Buddhist texts. Now this I find interesting. Where do you place the Lanka in the oeuvre of Mahayana? This should be very telling. While we are still in the dark as to how Mahayana Buddhism developed in India, we know that when it was introduced into China by the missionaries from India, like Bodhidharma, and Central Asia, it was already regarded as directly coming from the Buddha's own golden mouth, and that what must have developed during the several hundred years after his death was taken in a wholesale manner for a system fully matured in his lifetime, extending over a period of about half a century after his enlightenment. As the sutras were translated to Chinese, the first of which appeared in 68 AD, and this, if you've watched my earlier videos, and this actually may be knowledge that was after the publishing of this book. So there's a region in northeastern India, Pakistan. There's like 5 different countries there now, but it used to all be northeast India. And it's a region known as Gandhara. And there's a city there that was called Gandhara. I don't know if it's still called that or not. But it was a very large and important center of scholarship. There was wealth there, and wealth that could, as we've already discussed before, this fear of the loss of the teachings. It's in the Lotus Sutra. It's in the Mappo. It's in the idea of the age of degeneration, right? And degeneration, why? Because there's a fear that the teachings will be lost entirely. And so at this point in Gandhara, after Shakyamuni's extinction, a lot of time, effort, and money and support was spent taking this orally memorized and transmitted teaching and putting it to paper in as many languages as they had their own language. So this was a very important center. They used their own script, but they also translated into Sanskrit, into Pali, into Chinese, to distribute the teachings, but more so to completely transcribe these teachings to paper. Then they folded up all of these facets, all of these pieces of paper, and they put them in great clay jars, sealed them up, and put them underground to ensure that no matter what happened, at some point in the future, they could be rediscovered and continue to exist. And that was only about 20 years ago. That formed a great scholarly, filled a great scholarly void. From those translations, one could see how in different areas, in different languages, things were based on the same thing, but some had extra stanzas, some came from different areas, and they had inculcated their own additions, clarifications, if you will. So although it was really exciting to find all of this, it was also a little confounding because it demonstrates this tendency of people to personalize their experience with Buddhism. But this is what Shakyamuni told us to do from the very start. You must find your own path. The result will be the same. Your enlightenment is guaranteed, but you must endeavor to find your own insights, because they will be particular to your karmic freight train. Right? So, that's an interesting area of study, and if you could find some books on the... I should maybe find some and put links to it. I think I'll do that. And maybe I'll make that a short little document I'll put on the threefoldlotus.com site. That's a good idea. And the button will just say Gandhara, and nobody will know why the hell that button says Gandhara until they click on it, and then there'll be a little blurb and some links to some books. What do you think? Okay, let's continue. Got sidetracked there. So this was in 68 AD. They profoundly stirred the Chinese and then the Japanese mind, awakening their consciousnesses to its very depths. The following are the most important Mahayana texts that thus serve to move the feelings of the Far Eastern peoples and are still continuing to do so. Man, his obsession with religion is really disturbing to me. But this will be useful because here are some titles which you can find on your own. Google them. But they are all very well studied sutras, texts, which elucidate the Mahayana. Even including, and the first one he put in here is the Prajna-paramitas Sutra. That's the Lotus Sutra. That's number one, interestingly enough. One of the main theses of this inspiring scripture is the announcement that the Buddha never died, that he is forever living on the Mount of Holy Vulture and preaching to a group of the Shravakas, Pratyekabuddhas, and Bodhisattvas who are no less beings than ourselves. We are the Bodhisattvas of the earth. And that the Buddha has just one vehicle, jnana, for all beings. This must have been a revolutionary teaching at the time when the Buddha was thought to be just a transient and mortal like ourselves, and when the only thing that was left behind after his nirvana was his dharma, in which his followers were asked to find their master. Yeah, that's the Lotus Sutra. There's still in the rhetoric here, and you can hear it, that Buddha is some entity that we're all to get from or to find our own master. There's still that little bit of confusion in there that Buddha is a condition of mind, and that's what it is. Shakyamuni expressed it fully, but he made damn sure in the lifespan of the Tathagata chapter that all of us would understand that he had merely achieved something that all of us are absolutely capable of doing, and quite simply, by simply invoking it, but simply meaning an arduous training of opening that Gohanzon, opening that gate, so that we remain in that perceptive reality, that experience. That's the hard part. Number 2, the Avalokitesvara Vaikurvana Nirdesa. This is commonly known as the Kwanon-gyo in Japan and forms the 24 chapters of the Sanskrit Sadharma Pundarika. But it will be better to treat it as a separate document, as it has quite an independent message and has been so considered, though not always consciously, by its devotees. The Avalokitesvara is here represented as a merciful entity, a god, which doesn't belong in Buddhism, but it is an impetus, a state of mind, if you read it properly, certainly from our vantage point of the Lotus Sutra. But here, this guy's stuck on religion. So here it's a God of mercy who will help anyone who finds himself in trouble spiritually as well as materially. That's religion. That's some heavenly power that will come to your assistance. But that's not Buddhism. More accurately, it's some facet of your own mind that can elevate you out of your sufferings. Well, that's Buddhism. In popular minds, the God is no more masculine than feminine, if anything more feminine because of its mercy being more reality associated with eternal femininity. Wow, he's really trying hard to justify this religious view, isn't he? That he can assume various forms in order to achieve his ends appeals very much to the religious imagination of the Eastern people. Why do you think gods in these, quote, religions can change form? Get a clue. It's because of the way our minds work. These are not gods. These are not independent of us. They're not separate from us. They are our mental functionings. This Buddha, Avalokitesvara, is not some separate being. It is a formation in your minds of the, he was describing the different svabhavas, right? The different imaginings. Well, this is your mind at work. It's not a religion if you understand that it's in your mind that you're making or destroying these things. And this doctrine of transformation is one of the characteristic features of Mahayana Buddhism. 3, the Avatamsaka Sutra, the very first sutra, the Kigon in Japanese, the first sermon he ever delivered, Shakyamuni. And he didn't deliver it for long because he got that sad puppy look from people and he thought, I need to back off and start from a simpler place. This is an encyclopedic sutra of which we find the Gandavyuha and the Desabhumika forming a part. It is another Mahayana sutra that has influenced the Chinese and the Japanese mind profoundly, the so-called interpenetration, which constitutes the central thought of the sutra, is symbolically and effectively treated in the Chinese translations by Buddhadharma, 60 facils, by Shikananda, 80 facils, and Prajna, 40 facils. The sutra, as we have it now, contains many sutras which may be considered independent, though they no doubt belong to the same class of literature. The reading may be tedious from the modern point of view, as the main theme is not so succinctly presented, and it takes some time before the reader can get into the mood of the sutra itself. I can attest to that. It's extremely long. It's a big fat book, and it's so colorful. You remember all my discussions on the personages, how we take facets of how the mind works and create personifications of them to stand in for that whole myriad construction of imaginations. It's very much the way a writer writes fiction. You ever notice that? When you read a good book of fiction, many times it's as though each character in that book are just different facets of the same person, or of us, of people we know, right? We have the criminal in us. And so in a book, that criminal is fully explored as an independent thing, personage. We have the generous, we have the coy, we have all these different characteristics form into characters in a book. Shakyamuni was doing this, albeit all about the functions of the mind, the characteristics of different functions of the mind. The sutra. The sutra, as we have it now, contains many sutras which may be considered independent, though they no doubt belong to the same class of literature. The reading may be tedious, yes. After a quiet and patient pursuit of the text, however, he cannot help but be deeply impressed with its underlying spirit, whose grandeur of outlook almost surpasses human comprehension, because he was describing enlightenment. No wonder nobody understood what he was talking about. The huge rock-cut figure of Vairochana at Lungmen and the bronze figure of Nara in Nara are respectively the Chinese and the Japanese artistic response to the spiritual stimulation caused by the Avatamsaka or the Gandavyuha, which is the same thing. What do you want? Computers playing games. Another profound effect produced by this sutra on the Eastern mind is the conception of the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra with his 10 inexhaustible vows. He would not enter into nirvana, that coveted object of all Buddhists, because he would not have one single person unsaved behind him, unemancipated behind him. I am skipping over religious words here just to save you the arduous journey, okay? And by this emancipation was meant not only human personages, but the emancipation of every being, animate or inanimate. It was the vow of Samantabhadra to release animals, plants, and even such inanimate existences as mountains, waters, earths, etc., from the bondage of ignorance and karma. His universe, moreover, was far wider and more spiritualistic than our ordinary one. Yeah, he was just speaking far above the capacity of the people. This is why we have this theme in Mahayana that you must teach to the capacity and the time of the people, because to not do that is to further confuse them and drive them away from their own enlightenment. Not something you want to do, right? The fourth book, or sutra, is the Prajna-paramitas Sutra, which I discussed earlier. This is regarded by most Mahayana scholars to have been one of the first Mahayana literature that was declared against the hair-splitting scholastic philosophy of early Buddhist doctors. Gives us the doctrine of emptiness or void, whereby every possible straw of attachment is taken away from us. To be left alone in the void, even with this void vanishing from around us, is the method of perfect emancipation proposed by the Prajna-paramita. This was quite a direct, straightforward proposition on the part of the Mahayanists. It appealed greatly to intellectual minds as well as the mystical. While the Avatamsaka filled the universe with things of imagination, even to the minutest particle, the Prajna-paramita swept everything away from the universe, which now becomes a vast void indeed. And in 600 facets of the sutra, we are warned not to be afraid of, not to be taken aback by this vast void. If we stagger at this teaching of absolute emptiness, we are told by the Buddha that we cannot be good fellows of the Mahayana. The Vimalakirti Sutra. We just finished that one. This is a masterpiece, a drama with great literary merit, and because of this fact, it is read more generally than any other Buddhist sutra by the laity. The significance of this sutra lies in taking our soiled coat of attachment off our back, which we have been wearing ever since we became aware of the external existence. Another significant feature of the sutra is that its chief figure of interest is not the Buddha, but a wealthy layman called Vimalakirti. And I explained why that is, didn't I? It is this crafty old gentleman philosopher who puts to shame all the Shravakas and Bodhisattvas coming to argue with him about the deepest truths of Buddhism, except Manjushri, the head of the Bodhisattvas. That's not quite the setup, but you have the videos you can watch. The latter proved a good match for the eloquence of the lay disciple of the Buddha. What we have to notice, especially in this Mahayana text, is that Buddhism does not require us to lead a homeless life as a bhikshu in order to attain enlightenment. That is, the householder's life is as good and pure as the mendicant's. That's an important distinction. All right, we're not going to finish this, much as I would have liked to. But we're almost there. We're almost there. Yeah, there's a few more. Anyway. So this has value because it gives you some books that if you're undecided about what should I get next to read, to study, to get some insights, well, he's making a pretty darn good list here, right? The next one, and I'll finish with the sixth one. Well, I think How many does he have here? I think he only has the 8. So I'll do the 6th, 7th, and I'll start the 8th, but I won't read the whole thing. So the 6th one is the Srimala Sutra. Is also significant, for Srimala, the queen, inspired by the wisdom and power of the Buddha, delivers a great sermon on the Tathagata Garbha. The Mahayana may be said to be the revolt of laymen and laywomen against the ascetic spirit of exclusion pervading among early advocates of Buddhism. So certainly that's formative in our practice, because more and more Buddhism did, as Shakyamuni exhorted it to, it become a teaching, a learning, an experience for anyone, not solely for monks hiding themselves in a concrete castle. It's not elitist. There is no hierarchy. The only hierarchy is your Buddha-ness. Self-practice, right? So, Srimala Sutra, a story about that very thing. The next one, the Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra. The influence of this sutra on Oriental people is quite different from that of the other sutras, for it has awakened the resolve aspect of their practicing consciousness, which is established on the general basis of Mahayana philosophy. Superficially, the resolve of Amitabha looks very much like Christian faith in Christ. And I've pointed that out many, many times. Because Amitabha, again, is a personage, not some supernatural being, but humans being as they are. But the underlying thoughts are not at all the same. Thank you, Suzuki. The Jodo school could not take its rise from any other soil than Mahayana Buddhism. In Japan, this school has achieved a unique development, marking a spiritual epoch in the history of resolve in the East, religious faith. So, the Jodo sect is something Nichiren thoroughly takes apart. So we can see where Suzuki is distracted here, The 8th is the Parinirvana Sutra, or the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, which I've spoken on before. This once formed the foundation of the Nirvana school in the early history of Chinese Buddhism. That's a different Nirvana Sutra, not the Mahaparinirvana. Apologies. The early Nirvana Sutra is completely different teaching. Its main assertion is that the Buddha nature is present in every one of us. But before the arrival of this sutra in China, it was generally believed that there was a class of people known as Ichantika who had no Buddha nature in them and therefore who were eternally barred from attaining enlightenment. This belief was entirely expelled, however, when a statement to the contrary was found in the sutra saying, "There is something in all beings which is true, real, eternal, self-governing, and forever unchanging. This is called ego, though quite different from what is generally known as such by the philosophers. This ego is the Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature, which exists in every one of us and is characterized with such virtues as permanency, bliss, freedom, and purity." Wow, do I have a ton of issues with what he just said. Oh, there's a 9th one? Well, it basically is self-referential about the Lankavatara. All right. Wow. I don't even want... That's a whole nother video to try to take apart what he just said there. Yeah. How could you even say that? All of Buddhism, especially Mahayana, but even Hinayana, is obsessive about destroying the ego. So how could you then say that there is an all-encompassing ego that is the Buddha nature. There couldn't be more opposite terms. Oh, Suzuki. Maybe it's a poor grasp of English. I don't know, but man, that was foul. Foul, foul, foul. All right. That's it for today. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Thank you for the patrons helping to keep this channel alive. But mostly thank you for your practice, okay? Just keep it going. You'll get there. Whether you know it or not, you're getting there with every single chant. Just hang on to that state of mind, yeah? All right. I deeply appreciate you guys. Take care of your health. Be kind to yourself. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.